Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in over 5 years, David Bowie and his band!
Hello, my name's Frank Sims. I was the backing vocalist with my brother George and David Spinner on the entire Let's Dance album with David Bowie in early 1983. I have to say that early on, I was not a fan of David Bowie. I had obviously heard of him, but I was not the kind of guy that went out and bought his albums and thought he was a cultural icon or a musical icon. I knew he existed in that space, but I guess from my point of view, I was a guy that listened to a whole lot of intricate singing. My family I grew up in a family of intense singers, so we were paying more attention to people like the Beach Boys, who were like very sophisticated, tight harmonies, God only knows, Pet Sounds, Wouldn't It Be Nice, all sorts of things like that. That's what fascinated me and my family. But then after I met David and I became to be familiar with certain songs, Ashes to Ashes became one of my very favorite songs. I mean, I used to hear that and I would just, Fame, Fashion, just certain songs that we performed, Look Back in Anger, just certain songs that I had no idea. Station to Station, wonderful songs that I never would have heard because they were virtually album cuts that once we sang them, performed them, it became my favorites. And then from that point on, I would listen to old David stuff, Heroes, all sorts of things, and really be able to appreciate it more. Yes, so I was not a fan earlier on, but I became one. So with David, it was just like, well, this is another person to work with. But then the minute I met him, I found that this guy was a regular guy, very bright, very happy, always very engaging and very happy, very good mood, very positive, which most singers and rock stars are not. They're always, I mean, I work a lot with Billy Joel, and Billy's just kind of always, kind of thinking a little bit neurotic. What do you mean? What do you mean? So he's like a little, but David was always totally confident. Everything's fine. Let's have some fun. And David would come around to the hotel when we were in Japan. I remember he'd knock on the door and I'd open the door and here's David. And I'm thinking like, David Bowie's standing at the door. He's going, so Frank, would you like to go out drinking? Let's go round up George and let's go out, and then have it. And he wouldn't even bring in the bodyguard. It'd just be George and I and him and just start walking the streets. We were always cracking David up, always making jokes. And he'd say things, and because my brother and I, George, are quite comedians, and so we would be cracking him up. And we'd like make funny names about about the records. Instead of cat people, we call it cat litter. But most rock stars would think that was offensive. David opened up with this uproarious laugh. He was so happy. And we would change the lyrics to his songs, and instead of being offended, he was totally entertained. Most every other rock star we met on the road, very isolated, very attitudinal, very nose up in the air. David would never. He was like one of the guys, he would go out with the crew, he would go out having a beer after the show with the crew guys. Never an attitude. And I used to tell people, I said, you know why? He knows he's the star. He doesn't have to worry about somebody upstaging him because he is the star. It's evident in everyone. He used to put my brother George and I at the front of the proscenium on the stage singing with a microphone, and he'd be 40 feet in the back. Do you think he worried about his ego? Not a bit. He says because he was smart about that. He realized if I have talented people working with me, it's only going to reflect on me to make me look better. When David would show up, he didn't always show up at sound checks right in the beginning, which was no big deal. I mean, he was always there, but he didn't always show up. A lot of times the band would try to get sound checks, and then they would show up an hour later. Well, but I would be there. So if the band wanted to play something, I'd say, stay, that's what I meant to say, or do something. And so I would sing these things like that, or like we'd sing Jeannie. And sometimes, it's funny enough, I would like place little dirty words. I say Green Winnie. I was like, Green Weenie. And so the tour manager, Eric Bett, would come and say, like, he's Scotch. Shut up, don't you know? You don't say that. The people out there, don't shut up with that. Don't sing that word. So George and I would be like singing the tunes with David's ribbon mic at front, the great ribbon mic, and with all the monitors and the side monitors and the house system, so you sounded as big as God, standing there. So that's another fun thing we did. So we would sing David's, and again, he'd show up, and we start singing the bad words. He's convulsed in laughter. He wasn't like an actor like, tell those frigging guys they're off the show, they're off the tour. Whereas a lot of people would have said that, you know that. A lot of rock stars, get that guy out of here. He's pissing me off. Never. He would never pissed off. As far as picking out a particular job, a particular night that we played, I'd have to say just because there was sort of a cosmic effect on it. It might not have been our best gig, but at the time, was it Stephen Jobs or another one of those computer people had a festival in California for about 2 or 3, 4 years running called the US Festival. And each time he had it, he tried to make it larger and larger and larger. He invited the top stars of the world to come and play. Sting, Fleetwood Mac, Rod Stewart, Joe Walsh, the Eagles, whomever. He would invite to the US Festival. So one year, they asked David. That year, they asked David. We happen to have been in Cannes playing, but we had that obligation to do it. So the day after we got finished, we hopped in the plane. The minute after the game, we hopped in the plane, flew overnight, landed at Palm Springs, California, went to the hotel. It was amazingly hot. I remember how hot it was outside. We had to run from building to building. It was so hot outside. Palm Springs in summer, and Palm Springs, California. And I remember David and I and a photographer and a couple of people went out into the desert, and they were taking some pictures in the desert of Slick and stuff, and David and Slick in the desert, and I went out there. We came back in. A lot of celebrities around. Ray Bradbury, a science fiction writer, was there around that time. Susan Sarandon was hanging around with us. Shelley Duvall, the actress, was touring with. A lot of times they would take these people and they would go in the plane with us and would fly around with us. Shelley Duvall and Susan were 2 people I remember. But anyway, so the US Festival. So we showed up at the gig, and it was this enormous thing. They had sound towers that had to be staggered out for the people. There were so many people that the sound was not reaching them in time with the huge diamond screen. So they had to stagger sound towers with a time delay for the sound was coming out. And so I'd have to say, because it was about 300 or 400,000 people there, and you could just see the sea of unbelievable. So that I remember that just because it was so cosmic. The 400,000 people, and then ushering us all by ourselves, and for the big act, the big star. So just because he was, again, as you mentioned earlier, Let's Dance and the Serious Moonlight Tour were the event, the musical event of 1983. There's no doubt about it. And I remember the opening up in New Zealand, and the dance exponents opened up for us in New Zealand. Fantastic night, fantastic show, and I remember just it was. I think it was second to the US Festival, and seeing this mass of excited people, just watching them just grow up the hill with the trees. They were just filling the hills with trees and people and picnic blankets, and everyone looked like they were having such a good time, such a good time. And I remember just watching the people on the hill and the population, and it looked like everyone was there at a picnic instead of a rock concert. A lot of times, for instance, when we were in Paris, it was very, very hot, and people were very manic about coming to the stage and crowding the stage, and they'd been there the whole day for whatever reason, and it was very hot, and people were getting very ticked off, and they were squirting the hoses in the people, and there a lot of people heat exhaustion. But I remember at New Zealand, in Western Springs, when the dance exponents opened up for us, that it was like a picnic. Everyone was like coming there as though they were all. It was a family affair, and it was so wonderful. And young people, old people, babies, elderly people, and that's I do remember that. Yeah. As far as opening acts for the Serious Moonlight Tour, I remember several. We had Men at Work with Colin Hay. We had the Pretenders. We had the guys that did Red, Red Wine. Red, Red Wine. The Go-Go's played with us in Anaheim. They opened up for us, the Go-Go's. And Madness. Madness, who was an English group. So it was Go-Go's, Madness, David Bowie at the Oakland Coliseum. I remember that. Boom. It was never difficult to play the songs over and over. We never got tired of it. And each night there'd be a different way of performance, and we always tried to make the songs as perfect as we could. And it was just never a problem. It was just all the songs were so magnificent, and we had a big repertoire, so it was just great. We had a really good, interesting repertoire, and things from new stuff, Let's Dance, and stuff he had done in the '70s, and it was just great. It was just terrific. Never got tired of him. It's funny as each year goes by. My memory of the tour is so crystalline. And yet when I look by with every year, it becomes, well, that was 10 years ago. Oh, that was 15. Oh, that was, 20. Now I realize it was 25 years ago. So I look back at it, and I am so fond of every minute. And I remember, obviously there's more that I don't remember than I do, but I do remember enough to have enough wonderful memories. And I'm still reminded of it by friends and family and all sorts of people. And even just seeing... I'll walk by a window and suddenly see, well, there's the Let's Dance album, or someone's talking about that, or somebody's talking about that song, or I'll have friends who will hear the song on the radio, or see the video on MTV or VH1, or see an interview, or they say like, well, I saw you so and so. So that's it's wonderful to have that. But 25 years, it just doesn't seem like 25 years. It doesn't seem like 25 years.